Okay, Chair, the meeting is now live on YouTube.
Alethea. So, good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's Virtual Housing Company Task and Finish Forum on the 14th of December 2020. I am your chair, Councillor Dan Ledger, and I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, this meeting is being recorded. So please bear with us, bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this Task and Finish Forum meeting is dependent on an internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we're not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all your phones are turned off or are on silent, and make sure that all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Please keep your points short and do not repeat any points that have already been made, and please do not interrupt. If you wish to make any comment, please raise your electronic blue hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any member of the public who wishes to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website at eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphones, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you've confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. So over to you, Alethea.
So, Councillor Ledger.
Present.
Councillor Armstrong's given her apologies. So, Councillor Blakey has also given his apologies. Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Hall.
Present.
Councillor Moulding.
Present, but I will have to leave at midday for a surgery appointment.
Okay. Councillor Parr.
Present.
Councillor Rylance.
Present.
And Councillor Thomas.
Present.
So, Chair, I can confirm that we're quorate.
Alethea. So we'll move on to agenda item 1, which is public speaking. Sue, we don't have any members of the public wishing to speak, do we?
We don't, Chair, no.
Thank you very much. So moving on to agenda item number 2, minutes of the previous meeting. So if anyone has any comments that they wish to make on the set of minutes for the 8th of October 2020, please do so by raising your electronic blue hand. If no blue hands are raised, I'll take it that that's an indication that you're all in agreement of the minutes. So I see no blue hands are raised. So those minutes are agreed. Move on to agenda item number 3, apologies. Alethea, do we have any apologies?
Yeah, Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Blakey.
Perfect, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 4, declarations of interest. This will be done by a roll call again. So over to you again, Alethea.
Okay, so Councillor Ledger.
None.
Councillor Davey.
Sorry, was that my name?
Yes, it was.
Oh, sorry, what have we got to declaration of interests?
Yes, please.
None.
Okay, Councillor Hall.
None at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Hayward. Oh, is Councillor Hayward with us?
I don't think he's arrived yet, Alicia.
Okay. Councillor Moulding.
None.
Councillor Parr.
None.
Councillor Rylance.
None.
And Councillor Thomas.
None.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So moving on to agenda item 5, matter of urgency. There are none. Agenda item 6, confidential and exempt items. There are no confidential or exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way. So we move on to the substantive agenda item, which is agenda item 7, options and lines of inquiry to deliver more affordable and social housing. So Tim Child is going to introduce this item, and then I believe you may pass over to other officers. Over to you, Tim.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. At the October meeting, we focused on the current business model for East Devon Homes to provide, which was to provide housing for the general market and to provide a profit to the council's general fund. This led to a discussion about what the council was seeking to deliver. The council plan, indeed now the new statement of intent, the housing strategy and also the housing service plans all articulate the delivery of more affordable and social housing as a corporate priority. And from the October TAF meeting, it was requested that I produce a list of options and lines of inquiry for the forum to consider to achieve this. So this is in respect of social and affordable housing, not in respect at this stage of general fund housing, and hence the report that you have in front of you today. It's a joint report, as you'll have seen, involving obviously myself, but also Joe Garford, who's the acting service lead for housing. I wanted to involve Joe in the preparation of this report due to the very clear and very direct linkages directly with the HRA. So at the end of my report, you'll see I've set out a range of mechanisms that we can use to contribute towards increasing stock numbers, and we set out the advantages and disadvantages of each, together with, and this point's quite important, with a narrative of any work that we've already done in those areas. So these are not all new ideas. These many of these are ideas, mechanisms that in one way or another we are delivering now, or we've delivered in the past. Members, of course, may well through today's TAF meeting like to add to these opportunities and mechanisms. Now, no one single delivery mechanism is likely to be suitable in its own right, but there are opportunities now through this TAF to proactively develop a range of these different mechanisms, possibly to be set out, as I've suggested within the report, within a development strategy involving a combination of development, redevelopment, and acquisitions funded through active asset management, generating receipts from disposals, right to buy receipts, and also the opportunity to borrow against our headroom. And they're all set out within the table at the end of the report. Within the report, I set out that there would be benefits in a small working group of members and officers, liaising with other local authorities who have successfully used those mechanisms, or indeed other mechanisms that you as members wish to put forward today, to add to their stock numbers and to learn from those others how we could do similar within East Devon and report back through the TAF. Some of these types of mechanisms within the table we've done previously. So as examples, and other officers may want to come in on this in a bit more detail after me, but as examples, prior to, and this is set out within the report itself, prior to 2003, we were at that point delivering circa 25 new affordable homes per year through working directly with housing association partners. At that point, there was a dedicated resource in place to assist in that. We've also, so we talk within those options about flatted schemes, using possibly existing HMOs, so acquiring, rather than just acquiring new individual dwellings, acquiring flatted schemes in terms of where the demand is, but also in terms of helping in terms of the more general numbers. We've also, we currently acquire somewhere in the region of about 30 new individual dwellings per year through the buybacks. We've also, back in 2012, I think it was, undertaken a review of the garage sites within the HRA. And as a direct result of that review, we've since then built, this goes back some time following that review in 2012, but we've built approximately 25 new plots on those garage sites. So it's worth sort of, I suppose, summarising that within the table, we set out the mechanisms to which I suggest sort of a combination of a range of them can be used to help increase our stock numbers. Probably no one mechanism in its own entirety will deliver this, so it's a combination. But that combination, within that combination, there are some areas that are quite new to us. There are other areas that are less new to us and that we've delivered very successfully in the past, but perhaps we need to provide a particular focus on moving forward. I suppose finally, I just want to sort of touch on some of the challenges, I suppose. So within the report, I talk about possibility of bringing in a consultant to help us to deliver some of this, but actually the real stumbling block is and has been in recent years our own resourcing, our own officers' resource, both from a general fund perspective and also from an HRA perspective. We know what we can do. In fact, with many of those mechanisms, we've already done some of that or are doing it at the moment. But perhaps we're not doing enough of it. And there are some areas that we haven't explored in the past. But the key hurdles are, as I said, our in-house capacity and skills. The challenges around competing with RPs, with housing associations, competing funding needs as well. So we have a borrowing headroom within the HRA, but we also need to be very mindful, and that's set out within the report itself, around also the priorities around decarbonisation of a stock, investments, a stock investment needed generally, and also our investment in health and safety compliance. So whilst delivery of additional stock is one key element, that it needs to be balanced against those others which relate to the existing stock. There's also the risk appetite that we as an authority wish to take in terms of some of those mechanisms at the end of the report. Now, the ones that sort of spring to mind really in terms of risk are direct development by East Devon, but also possibly around sort of speculative acquisitions. There are advantages of those approaches, but they also do, as you'd expect, carry with it some risk. It's probably worth just briefly going back to the recommendations, just to sum up the report, and then I will pass over, if it's okay, to John or Joe, or possibly both, just to offer their sort of direct HRA input into this before we open this up for discussion. So in terms of the recommendations, number one, recommend to officers which options for social and affordable housing provision within the appended table to explore further. As I said, it may well be that we today actually add to that list. Recommendation 2, recommend a working group of members to work with officers approaching and learning from other authorities who have grown their HRA stock in recent years before reporting back to the TAF. So once we've discussed those particular areas where perhaps there are benefits in and we can truly learn from others, and once you've identified what those examples are, then it's about identifying the local authorities within our region that are best able to offer some support and guidance to us on that. And a third recommendation, it relates to the housing company itself and what it is as members and as part of the TAF we choose to do with the housing company, because you'll see from the report and from my sort of discussion over the last sort of five or so minutes, but actually we are moving very much away from what the original TAF was set up to look at, to looking at affordable and social housing provision. Now, once we've got a clearer way forward on that, it may well be that there are still opportunities to use the housing company in some form or another, possibly with more sort of speculative long-term land banking, possibly. But again, that's a discussion for this meeting. So perhaps before we open it out to members, if it's okay, Chair, can I just ask whether either John Golding or Joe Garford have anything they'd like to add?
If I
may, Chair, Tim's made a really good summary of the key issues that we're facing, and in terms of a reality check, probably just worth emphasising that the housing revenue account has not got limitless resources, and there are real pressures on the HRA in terms of decarbonisation. You know, we estimate many millions of pounds required to decarbonise our housing stock, which is probably the single greatest proportion of our carbon footprint as an organisation. So there's that, and then there's the tenant safety issues that was raised. There's the Building Safety Act that's going to come out very shortly following the Grenfell fire, and there will be issues flowing from that. So there's some really difficult tensions in terms of spending. And I suppose it's also worth recognising in terms of context, for a good number of years now, government policy has favoured and funded registered providers to deliver most of the nation's affordable housing delivery. Now, there's a sense that that is changing, but they are big players in the market that we essentially will be competing with. And I suppose the final thing is around skills and in-house skills. You know, long gone are the days when local authorities had major development programs and in-house architects, surveyors, and the like. And one of the reasons why the housing company hasn't had the success that we'd hoped for, I suspect, is because we'd under-resourced it. There are no staff in the housing company, and very few staff on our books now that have got the wide range of skills required for development. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John. Joe, do you want to make any comments this time?
Yeah, just a brief one, really, to reiterate what John said. You know, the housing decarbonisation is going to be enormous, and although we are bidding and have been very successful in bidding, as you know, we've currently got 100 homes being sort of slowly decarbonised, as we won an award of £500,000 in September. We're now going for the second round of funding, where we're asking for another £500,000, but the big tranche of money comes out in 2022. And although we will get, I hope, a huge tranche of money from central government, we have to match fund that pound for pound. So it's still a huge draw. And the health and safety stuff is becoming a sort of an industry all in its own. We're having to put in a compliance team within housing now in order to meet our legislative requirements. So there is a huge draw on the housing revenue account. But yeah, so that's all I'd like to say at this point, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So with that, we'll we'll invite non-speakers or non-members to speak next. So if any non-member wishes to speak at this time, can you raise your electronic blue hand? So we'll go to Paul Miller first.
Thank you very much, Chair. So at scrutiny last week, I thought it was quite sad, rather stunning, to hear the Leader of the Opposition lay out his disappointment with the new administration's position on the housing company. No home was ever built by the former Conservative administration, and there was no main thrust or strategy. I was also concerned to hear in the same meeting that arm's length council housing companies cannot deliver social housing. Because about an hour and a half's drive up the M5, that's exactly what's happening in Bristol, where a housing company run by Bristol City Council is partnering with registered providers to achieve 23% affordable homes at social rent for each development, literally providing social housing. And I think it's important to remember that while all council housing is social housing, not all social housing is council housing. Registered providers and arm's length council-owned housing companies can and do build housing at social rent, and those homes are not then lost the right to buy. Now, one councillor has previously raised his concerns with me that we would be exploiting some kind of loophole if we went down this road and it would be challenged in the courts. But this is evidently not the case. From the reading I've done, from Bristol to Bournemouth, from Wolverhampton to Wigan, district, city and unitary authorities, they are literally using their housing companies for this very purpose. It's worth pointing out as well, we've not had this kind of forensic assessment into the possibilities of the housing company until you, Chair, passed the motion to establish this TAF. So any criticism from the opposition that this administration is not moving on this must be taken with the greatest pinch of salt. The former Conservative administration had 2 years to come up with a plan before being voted out in May 2019, and none came. And to my mind, there was a golden opportunity too that was missed. We have the Knoll, our old council offices in Sidmouth. It would have been the perfect site for the council to use its housing company to partner with a local developer or construction firm and registered providers of social and affordable housing to build much needed homes for first-time buyers, young people and working families. Rather than seek a quick and easy profit from the sale of the Knoll, we could have taken the longer term view and could have then reinvested the profits into acquiring land for larger scale sites serving future generations. Instead, the former Conservative administration took the easy, lazy, short-termist view and irresponsibly sold the Knoll to a developer for luxury retirement flats and looted the old building of all of its artefacts, if I remember correctly. That was not a policy to encourage inclusive growth and to provide locally built housing for local people in East Devon. And if I remember correctly, the developer didn't even pay up on time. So what I've found out from the research I've undertaken over the past few weeks is that arm's length council-owned housing companies work, but immediate success is most likely where councils own lots of land and they build mixed communities of different tenures for different price ranges, social, affordable and market. Bristol City Council is one such authority which is doing this and is using its housing company, which it calls Gorham Homes, as an entity with an unashamed social purpose to fix the major housing crisis within Bristol, building homes themselves rather than selling its land to entirely self-serving big private developers like Persimmon, and watching with horror as they build terrible homes, serve only their shareholders and greedily land bank while rewarding their CEOs with multi-million pound bonuses. Now, I'm sorry I'm going on for a long time. It would be my only contribution today, Chair, so thanks for your forbearance. At the last meeting of the TAP, Councillor Thomas gave some members a healthy dose of realism. If we ever want this housing company to work, right now or in the future, we cannot do it alone. Bristol realised this fact at a very early stage. They knew they didn't have the expertise in-house. They didn't have an in-house army of architects, quantity surveyors, brickies, sparkies. So in their wisdom, Bristol City Council's company committed to take up joint ventures with local private housing building companies, construction firms, housing associations, partnering with organisations which were small, sustainable and local, and promoting the inclusive growth, and profits are being split 50-50. Now, our housing company could have started doing that, Chair, 3 years ago, And today we could be like Bristol, many other areas, on the cusp of building communities which are a mix of market, affordable and social, what Nye Bevan referred to as the living tapestry of the mixed community, where the doctor, the butcher, the grocer and the farm labourer live side by side, or by today's definition, the software developer, the salesperson and the Amazon operative. What we would be building would be at a much smaller overall scale to Bristol due to the lack of sites that the council currently owns. The great thing about housing companies acting as developers is that there aren't viability assessments where suddenly the developer flashes out their get out of jail card on affordable housing. Look at Goodmore's Farm in Exmouth, 370 homes, only 16 of which will be sold or rented below market rates. Imagine if we'd have gotten ahead of the game. Who are registered providers going to want to partner with? Us or big developers? They're going to want to partner with us. So opportunities have been lost. The question today is, do we keep the housing company dormant, or do we wind it up, or do we try to make it work? See, I'm not precious about how we deliver it, but we need to get to a place where we're delivering locally built homes for local people, not for buy-to-let landlords or property investors from London and the South East, buying their second, third, fourth, fifth homes. Local homes for local people, invest in the future generations. And that should be our #1 priority, whatever is decided at the end of this meeting. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I think with regards to the recommendation 3, we should include Bristol on that, the list of what the working party should look into with local authorities, because they are doing some fantastic work, especially with Gorham Homes. So thank you for that, Councillor Miller. We'll move on to Councillor Peter Faithfull.
Well, I was just really going to put across a simplified version of what Councillor Miller has just said. Just a question: how can you put across to us clearly that this is a proper housing company providing social housing through that company, and not just bypassing the Help to Buy scheme? Because that's what the whole thing, that was explained right from the very start when we had the housing TAF years ago. That was what that was made clear at the time.
Sorry, Councillor Faithfull, you finished?
Yes, thank you. It was just...
So you just want that clarified? Could any of the officers clarify that?
Chair, perhaps I can assist. One of the advantages that we did look at when we set the company up, although it wasn't the prime reason for setting the company up, was that it isn't subject to the right to buy. So as the report indicates, we are losing a significant amount of our stock each year through the right to buy, something like 30 homes per annum, and we're struggling to keep pace with that. I think it's also worth saying that when we set the company up, we set it up for a specific purpose, which was initially, at least, to deliver market housing. There's a full business plan that underpins the company, and it was quite modest ambitions initially. Put our toe in the water, see how it goes, and it was to acquire and let market houses, market rents, not social housing, not affordable housing, and to see how that went, and then review and expand if that was successful. Now that business plan can be altered and it can be tailored towards a different set of ambitions and risks if that's what the council wants. More of a Bristol model, I would suggest, not the Croydon model, where Croydon are had some serious issues around some of their investments. But the one thing that we need to be clear of, I suppose, is the company isn't a registered provider and the council is. So there does need to be, if we're going to move down a different route, we do need to factor in the implications of being a registered provider, because it's only really registered providers that can genuinely provide social housing. So there does need to be a slightly different relationship between the council and its housing company if we're to deliver development through the company. Thank you.
So just on that point, John, so we could utilise the housing company to provide the market side of housing development on certain sites, and then utilise the housing revenue as the registered provider for that portion. So if we were looking at a site of 10 houses, 6 would be utilised through the housing company, and then 4 would be done through the HRA.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Perfect. So move on to Councillor Arnott, Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Chair. You don't have to call me that every time. Yes, thank you so much to you, Chair, for the vision you've already showed in getting this going in recent months. And great thanks as well to John and to Joanne for the briefings they've given us today. I was gripped by the narrative drive of Councillor Miller's contribution. I agree with absolutely every single word that he has said. And I think my contribution today, I hope, which will be brief, you'll be glad to hear, is to pick up on John's point, John Golding's point. And I noted in the report at point, don't remember, 1 point something, but as he said, we're lacking staff resource on this. Now, we're not going to be obviously in a position where we become a kind of town hall with a department of civil engineers and architects and so forth. We'll never get there, but quite clearly, and I imagine this is on Tim's mind as well, we do really need to provide some more officer resource. Well, I'm scanning to see Simon. Yes, you're in there, Simon, as well. I think probably as we look into this management review, which is impending, actually one of the more important strata of that is the sort of the second and third down from the top dogs, so to speak. And I think if we're going to realise the kind of vision I'm hearing today, and I suspect there'll be a lot of unanimity behind it, we are going to have to find the resources, and we're going to have to find the ingenious ways of forward funding those so that stays within our medium-term financial plan and so forth. But as far as this administration is concerned, please be assured there would be complete commitment to do that, providing that it makes the financial case is made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. So if there's no other non-committee members wishing to speak, we'll move it to in-house. So can you raise your electronic blue hands? Councillor Rylance.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. I don't know who drafted it, but it's a good report. It lays out quite a lot of options. Well, for me, one of the most depressing parts of this report is the fact that we used to own 8,000 social houses, 8,000 council houses. We now own something over 4,000, and we have 4,000 people on the waiting list. This suggests to me that we have exactly the same level of need that we had when Right to Buy started, but we have not kept pace with the building programme. For me, it's absolutely imperative that we begin a social housing programme as very distinct from an affordable housing programme. I know there's a lot of talk bandied about affordable. Affordable is not affordable for many of the people in our district. Affordable for many people in our district means a life on benefits, wraparound benefits, because the wages are simply not high enough to afford rent plus normal living expenses. So what we are doing by not producing more social housing at a truly affordable rate is consigning people to a life of incredibly full-time work plus hours and hours a week trying to sort out their benefits. That cannot be right. This is not a social good. We can't keep delivering so-called affordable housing as a cure for poverty and then consign people to hours and hours of extra work a month trying to keep on top of their benefits. It's simply shocking that we should even consider that. So with that in mind, for my money, we have to be delivering more social housing. We have to try and make up this shortfall that's been lost through Right to Buy. I was very taken with some of the options. I hadn't even considered, the options of in some of the options in this report. But I did have a few questions actually about some of the items, and one of them was about the voids. I mean, I understand, houses have to be lived in order to stay in good repair. And I understand that when we have voids, we don't really want to put people in on long-term tenancy. But have we considered, for example, marketing voids as short-term tenancies for people who are between houses, who are stuck in a housing chain? We hear all the time of housing chains going awry because one housing sale fails. Have we considered marketing these houses as 1 or 2 or 3 months tenancies to people like that? Obviously, for the people already living there, it would be a lot of coming and going, but it might be a revenue stream, and it would ensure that the house was lived in, warm, and not falling apart. So I think that was the first item in the table that Tim spoke to us about. So that's one thing. The other thing is that if we are talking about building more social housing, and I really hope that we are heading in that direction, we have to make sure that we're building it in the right places. I mean, to echo what Councillor Miller said earlier, we have to be building the right houses in the right places. We have to be enabling people to stay in the places they want to live in and where they work and where their support system is. Because otherwise what we're doing is we're dismantling a social support system that should be there for people. You know, a lot of people rely on their parents or their grandparents to help babysit their children or pick them up from school. We can't, through our housing policy, dismantle people's social support networks. So we have to consider that we will be building on the edge of villages where nothing has been built for, say, 25 years at the moment. And I'd like to see a lot more emphasis put on being able to do that and being allowed to, allowing people to remain within their communities. And also allowing people who are aging and can't manage stairs anymore to also remain within their communities for precisely the same reasons, so that they can still access family support. And I really think that we have a large part to play as a planning authority in allowing communities to prosper and for the full range of demographics to be present in villages and to remain in villages. Because what our present housing policy is doing is completely altering the social fabric of villages. We're not allowing young people with not very highly paid jobs to stay in those villages. We're not allowing older people who become disabled or disabled people to stay in those villages. We need to address this in all urgency. And I understand that maybe the housing company is not fit to deliver social housing right now, but surely, it's an already set up thing. And if we can, as John Golding said, repurpose the business model, surely we should be looking at doing that. But we need to be able to deliver houses in the right places for people. It's not going to be good enough to be in the same pond as Persimmon and Bovis Homes, trying to fight for sites that they can afford to pay a whole lot more money for, to end up delivering when we end up basically getting the crumbs of housing sites, which then end up delivering social housing in completely the wrong places. So we really need to consider where we're putting houses and where we're planning on putting houses. And we need to consider whether we can, for example, use the housing company for the purpose it was originally intended, but add a significant social housing requirement to it, so that we do end up pepper potting as we should be, really. Maybe not pepper potting as in having isolated houses here and there, which I understand is a nightmare to maintain, but actually making sure we're not delivering ghettos of either kind, that we are mixing, as Councillor Miller said, we're delivering mixed communities demographically and also socially, because those are the healthiest kinds of communities. So I really hope that we are talking about social housing through all this process and delivering more social housing, because I see anecdotally from my constituents that what they really want is a long-term tenancy that's affordable for them, so they don't have to spend hours a month having to juggle their benefits on top of their jobs, and that they can stay in their support network. That's what we should be aiming to do. And first and foremost, it's about the individuals that we're dealing with. I know there's a whole business model around it, and there's a whole business case to be made. But at the end of the day, what we should be delivering is houses for people where they need to live and where their support networks are. And I hope that we all bear that in mind through this process. So more social houses, please, delivered by whatever mechanism we can in the right places. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Just on that point, you will find in the draft service plan for my portfolio next year that we are going to be looking at policies for community-led development. So touching on exactly what you're saying there, to try and work with communities, be that through whatever delivery model we need, cooperatives, CLTs, trying to utilize the housing company if it gets repurposed that way, but to deliver community-led development in the areas that need them. And that's just something that I've asked to personally put into my service plan to then hopefully be rolled out throughout others. So moving on, does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Moulding.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I must say I agree with a lot of what has already been said, but I don't think we need to be necessarily put off by the fact that we haven't got the in-house expertise to manage projects of this type. And I think this was what Councillor Hall, who's in on this meeting, was advocating when he put together the original TAF regarding a housing company and how that could help provide a number of opportunities for the council, and particularly with regard to social housing. Why I say we should not be put off by our lack of expertise in-house is that there are within East Devon a number of SMEs who would be able to form partnerships with ourselves and be able to deliver housing on perhaps a design and build basis that would be able to deliver on relatively small sites, where, as I believe somebody mentioned earlier, there could be a ratio of market force houses and social housing. And obviously that's been done on a number of occasions through rural exception sites and so on. And particularly the SMEs could work with us to deliver housing badly needed in some of our rural villages, where there could be small sites, and those could be arranged in such a way that local people in those villages could be able to stay within those villages, either on a market force basis or on a social housing basis. Could be through a community land trust or whatever. But I know that within East Devon there are still a number, and it's mentioned in the table, a number of large plots in our existing stock, which could be split up and more social housing provided on those plots. And also, and it mentions again in the table about garage sites. Now, in Axminster, at Fox Hill, there are a number of garages at the end of a road, which I lived in between the years of 1953 to 1960. A lot of you won't remember those times, but I lived in Fox Hill, and those garages were exactly the same then. They were at the end of a cul-de-sac. There are about 6 garages there. Apparently, according to a resident who I spoke to only just recently, only one of those garages is any use at all. All the roofs, which were probably corrugated asbestos cement, they've all been caved in, and only one of those 6 garages is in use. Now, they've either got to be rebuilt, they've either got to be removed because they're at the end of a cul-de-sac and there are so many vehicles now using that road compared with, say, 1953, when I lived there, that it's just chaos in that cul-de-sac, and that hammerhead at the end of the road needs to be totally rearranged. Either the garage is knocked down and perhaps, say, 4 small social houses could be built at the end of that cul-de-sac, and at least give people the opportunity of turning around properly and utilising that area. So for me, looking down through that table, there are a number of options which we could explore. I think there is a great opportunity to work with small building companies in the area to enable them to help us deliver what we want for the people of East Devon, and it's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moulding. So we move on to Councillor Ian Hall.
Thank you very much, Chair. Very interesting listening this morning. We've got fresh pairs of eyes on this situation. We've got more experienced eyes, and some of the constants constants we have is obviously John Golding, and I think John set it out very well when we were looking at the housing company, really looking at building 10, cell 6, housing revenue account could have 4. There are a lot of solutions within East Devon that is what I would say is quick wins. But at the same time, we need to have balance when it comes to housing needs surveys for the towns and the district as a whole. In Axminster, I undertook, one of the people undertook the housing needs survey in 2015. I think that very much needs to be freshened up. But be that as it may, I do think that what we need to be doing as a district is looking at what available areas we could actually look at. We know that the garage TAF was very much undertaken. I believe that was as far back as 2011-12. But as an example, what Councillor Moling was saying about Fox Hill. We in Millway Rise, which is the Mecca, is 2nd Avenue. At 2nd Avenue, you've got 2 properties, 1 and 2 2nd Avenue. And I did say time before, if those 2 properties, I hate to say it, were levelled, what that would do would open up St Andrews Drive garages, which is a massive, I mean massive footprint, which is owned by East Devon. But the problem is with the present access to St Andrews Drive is because obviously these houses were built on the camp after the Second World War, that the access to the garages is very, very, very narrow, which I would say is a very old Anglia car could probably fit in there, but nothing to these days sort of vehicles. But these garages in the area of Millway Rise, we have several blocks of garages. These are areas that I feel on the biggest, what was the biggest council housing estate in East Devon, need to be looked at. Yes, it may not be with what the housing needs are at the moment, but I tell you what, I would rather see people move from Exmouth and Honiton to somewhere in Axminster than having to move out our district altogether. Because what I'm seeing, and I've seen it since I've been a councillor, we're having the brain drain. And I mean, from personal experience, my daughter wanted to live in Axminster. She's had to move to Chard. Why? Because the housing prices are lower, the water rates are lower, the employment wages are higher, and this is just going 12 minutes up the road. We have an elephant here, and the only way you can eat an elephant is literally a bite at a time. So I think all the members here today would all agree that we need more affordable homes. I personally want to see more social homes. And looking at what Tim was saying about 30 homes a year on buyback, I think, hey, that's a good start. But when this housing company was put together, I had said time and time again, wouldn't it be great that we have a framework, a mechanism that we build homes, and we build homes for the needs, be that private rental, be it social housing. But also, as an aspiration, let's get local people building these homes so that we got the economy also getting stimulated at the same time. I know that this is easier said than done, putting all this together. But if we do have collectively a desire to really, really support the youngsters of the towns that we support, to keep them within their communities, because we also got to be mindful, some of the employers, bigger employers, they're not going near East Devon. Why? Because they haven't got the workforce. And this is why I was so passionate about the Axminster Master Plan, about the private housing, the social housing, the employment space, because there's no point in having these homes for people without the jobs. Now, having 6 acres of employment space is so important. So I know that we are speaking about housing company, but we can't look at this in isolation, because what we need to be doing is giving life chances to everybody who lives within our district. But I look forward, Chairman, to carry on being part of this TAF and carrying on with the debate. But thank you very much for indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. So just while we have that, can we be looking at the actual opportunities for increasing HRA stock numbers and just start honing in on some of the mechanisms that we as a TAF wish to give back feedback to the officers on what we would like to explore more, so that we can feed it into the recommendations, as well as start thinking about a possible working group of members on recommendation 2. So we can start figuring those out into our debates. We can actually start moving forward. I feel like we're talking a lot about what the housing company could be, rather than honing in on what we can do right now. So if we can start honing in on that, that'd be fantastic. So Councillor Ollie Davey.
Thank you, Chair. So if I understand correctly, what you're asking is the question we were bandying around last week, which is what can the housing company do that the HRA can't? And does it have a role to play? And I think Councillor Miller, in what I would describe as a keynote speech there, really kind of set the tone for the whole morning. And it suggested that we follow the Bristol model of partnerships with local builders, with registered providers, and possibly community land trusts has been suggested, community groups, which sounds like a great idea, and I'd certainly be interested in investigating that further. I know that in Bristol they do have a certain advantage in that they do own a lot of land there. And we would have to look at our land stock and see what we could do. Now, I think if I understood Councillor Rylance correctly, she was talking about allowing small villages to expand somewhat. And this is something I've begun to think that our local plan, the way it's framed at the moment, kind of puts lines around villages, or else regards them as being in the open countryside and resists development there. And I have a feeling that if you allow villages to grow in a managed way, then they will begin to sustain the services that they need to make them sustainable. And I've just been doing some research this morning on what the numbers are to make certain types of shop or facility, doctors' surgeries and so on viable. And I'm interested in that and allowing villages to build. It also seems there could be an opportunity for us there by acquiring smaller plots of land that might only be for a small development and partnering with local builders. The volume builders are not, the Persimmons are not going to be interested in a development of 5 or 10 houses. They want to build hundreds. But it could be a very good opportunity for us, and then to work either with ourselves or with another registered provider to let those as social housing. So I'm interested in exploring that model further.
Councillor Davies, so from what I'm understanding from members currently is that they want to go down a community-led development model as well. But what Councillor Davies just said there is that would be rural exception sites, so that would be subject to 66% affordable housing if it was deemed in the open countryside. So it wouldn't be following that same model, 6 and 4. It would be 66% affordable housing in those areas. So move on to Councillor Ian Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move slightly off the subject back to the overall strategy approach of this, if I could. Firstly, I'm pleased, I think, that we're looking at our objective now as being to improve the level of social housing available to people who need it across East Devon in the right place, the right sort, and at the right location and an appropriate price. If we're doing that, that's extremely powerful as a first objective. I think we've got to recognise on that as to what mechanisms are appropriate for that. The HRA, without question, has a skill, has a resource that is experienced in the provision of social housing. There's no getting away from the fact that government policy is not helpful, shall we say, charitably. I think as a former Conservative leader of the council, I think all will remember I was quite vocal, as I believe was my predecessor, on our opposition to the government policy on right to buy. Now, obviously, I can't comment for the current administration or current Conservative leadership as to what their view is, but that was my position and that has not changed. But where do we go from here? What we haven't got in here is we're diving down into specifics. We're diving down into specific mechanisms. We're diving down into specific sites. What we've not got our head around is what is the actual scale of the aspiration? What are we talking about? Are we talking about a return to 350, 400 socially affordable houses per annum being delivered? Or are we talking about an aspiration to deliver 20 to 30 of the sort of level we're at now? That sort of decision needs to be made by this forum because it fundamentally drives the appropriate mechanism which we can use to deliver them. Beyond then, again, what's the scale of our budgetary approach and our finance? Where will this finance come from? For the point that of decarbonisation was made by John at the beginning, we're looking at between 85 and 165 million pounds of capital investment required for our existing stock. Yet we seem to be politely ignoring that. Yet we're still getting down to trying to get into detail without looking at the sort of numbers and where that funding might come from. So my first two questions are, what is the scale of our aspiration? Do I assume it's focused on socially affordable? Are we then, how are we going to deliver the financing for that? Competing with housing associations, it's quite interesting. I like the Bristol model as portrayed by Councillor Miller, as I think he probably knows. I would qualify, I believe he may have attributed his comments on risk of right to buy to me. I did actually state and still of the view that actually to apparently cynically use alternative mechanisms to circumvent government policy must be regarded as an environment of risk. Now, if you will agree or disagree on that, I believe without question it should be, and based that actually on discussion with our head of legal services at the time and since. So I'm not saying it will happen, but on the other hand, don't ignore it as a potential risk. Housing company. Right. My views again on this, I'm not going to go through them all again. I can see Simon squirming now in his seat in Seaton. And they were well known. We didn't give it chance. Philosophically, it should be killed off. Not because some form of housing company isn't the right way to do it, but this was never a vehicle. It never existed beyond Companies House, not even filling in its returns. So to say it failed, you know, we smile when the number around the room were, oh no, this is actually the truth. You know, we did not give it chance. We never gave it chance from the off. It was chronically under-resourced, underfunded, in the effect it delivered nothing with nothing. And why are we surprised? I never was. Another thing in terms of what makes something like this have a chance of success. Firstly, beyond the clear objectives and clarity in what it's actually trying to do, it does need the relevant skills. I've never yet seen an organization succeed that didn't have the relevant skills for success in any form. Equally well, it needs focus. It can't be something that we try using, we'll just tag it onto something else. So that to me argues again down that the approach of the Bristol model, I'd actually like to see us investigate further. I don't claim to know an enormous more about it than having been educated by my friend Councillor Miller down at the far end of the district. But it's something for me that would appear to have legs. But can I just say for the first recommendation 3, let's just kill this vestige of a housing company off now. And we keep coming back to it. Oh, the housing company, the housing company doesn't exist. So if we're going to go forward with some form of organization, it may or may not be a housing company. It doesn't need, who's to say that's the right mechanism? Because we haven't even agreed what the right objective is yet. So anyway, sorry if that sounds a bit harsh, but for me, you know, we've got to sort out what we're trying to do. We've got to put some numbers on it in terms of aspiration. We've got to understand the financial implications of that. And let's be clear whether we can actually fund that or whether we can get it funded. If we can't, then frankly, we're all wasting our time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas, for that dose of realism. We'll move on to Councillor, not even a councillor, John Golding, we'll be on to you.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just pick up on one or two of those issues? Hopefully it will help the debate. In terms of there's been quite a lot of debate around social housing. 30 years ago, all council and housing association housing was social housing. And then the government kept reducing the grant levels available, and eventually asked housing associations in the main to bring in private finance to support the development of affordable housing. And as a consequence of developers having to borrow, the rents went up and affordable housing was devised, and grant rates for development of affordable housing have gradually dropped over the years. The rents are something like 30% higher than social housing rents, and it is primarily a difference in the amount. And the government have been content for many years to effectively subsidise through housing benefit. So higher rents subsidised through housing benefit, and that's the model that exists currently. So if we are to develop on a social rented basis, then it does mean more borrowing and more cost to the developer, if that's us. Just picking up on a couple of things on the Councillor Moulding mentioned SMEs. That's how we developed, I think, 4 of our garage sites a few years ago. We actually commissioned local architects and surveyors, quantity surveyors, and obviously contractors to build for us. That was successful, and that without having big staff in-house, that probably is the way forward. We probably need to relook at our garage site following some of the comments. I'm aware of, we developed 2 garage sites in Axminster. Really difficult to get planning permission because obviously planners are concerned about putting or replacing garages and off-street parking with houses that generate more parking. So don't underestimate the difficulty in releasing garage sites. And some of the sites that we haven't developed have got all sorts of development constraints. So main sewers running through garage sites and things like that, which is often the case when these large estates were laid out. But that's not a reason not to relook at the opportunities that might exist. One of the things that I found really attractive about East Devon when I came 17 years ago was the amount of landscaping and open space we have around many of our estates. And whilst there are opportunities for infill, I do caution about infilling too much, because I think that is one of the reasons that makes East Devon great, is that our social housing stock does generally sit in nice environments as well. So there is a limit to the level of infill that we might want to deliver as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So we'll move on to Councillor Helen Parr.
Yes, really, I think Councillor Thomas's questions, what I am also wanting to ask, because it does seem to me that this funding, it's all down to how do we get funding. And another point I wanted to make was that looking down the list of options, it's remarkable how many of those things were being done before. And I think we're looking at very few options now that haven't been explored. Our officers are in there, they know exactly what chances and possibilities there are, and they were making sure that the council was following them. On this point of villages and housing, well, I said at scrutiny, one of the villages in Collie Valley, my ward, has just got permission for an exception scheme of all affordable housing, which includes a bungalow, and hopefully that is going to be built. There was another exception scheme at Collerton, which was all affordable housing. And then since then, we've had 2 in Collerton, which have been done by housing providers. I think we need to explore the Bristol option. How is that funded? I mean, it sounds marvellous, but I think the difficulties are there. But I'd certainly support exploring more and finding out what other councils are doing and learning from their knowledge, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parr. I think the main difference with Gorham Homes, which is the Bristol City's arm's length development company, is the fact that they have so much land at their disposal. The actual council itself has a land disposal policy, which it then provides to registered providers and community land trusts, and that is the main difference between us and Bristol. There are other models. Cambridge City Council have done that's Conservative control. They've done absolute wonders with it. So there are other options. Personally, what I think should happen with the TAF moving forward is that we set up the working party. We look at all the different models from surrounding local authorities and local authorities that have done exceptionally well around the country. We then work with officers to recommend what kind of resource that needs to provide to whatever option we put forward as that working group. We can then, obviously, we can't decide which mechanisms need to be taken off the table until we've done that work. So I think all mechanisms should be on the table until after that working party has done its work. And then that will lead us to what finance is required, whether that we utilise monies from the HRA, whether we look to the public's work loan or such like. I think that will be the easiest way to move us forward positively and bring back something constructive for the next meeting. Councillor Eleanor Rylance, you want to come in next?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for coming back. I remember I forgot to ask a question, actually, and that was about, I was intrigued by your idea of, I don't know, was it Tim who, you did the report, did you? Okay, so the idea of buying land speculatively in villages for rural exception sites seems like quite an interesting one, because that's something that only we could do, really, or the local parish council could do. I don't think volume builders would be in that market at all. You said that there's a risk to that, which is that we don't get planning permission. Obviously, that is a risk, but I guess not. We can just sell the land on again as agricultural land, having paid presumably agricultural prices for it. It's not a massive outlay, is it? So, I mean, I suppose that's my question to Tim, really. Is that something we could explore further? Because I suspect that would be quite a good option for delivering more social housing in villages where it's needed. So how much of a risk is it really? I mean, is that something we could really actively pursue, is my question.
Tim, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, if I can, please. So for me, we're probably not going to get the huge numbers in these example with that particular example, but it's probably the one that whilst I've been with East Devon over the last couple of years, I've just had lots and lots of references to, whether it relates to the rural exception sites, whether it relates to the exception sites linked with the CLTs. And it's just something that we've heard lots about, but not really, certainly in recent years, explored. Now, so for me, it's probably one of the more exciting, and it also absolutely links back in with providing homes for people locally in villages. So that's in terms of the risk. I don't think you'd be getting those sites at agricultural land values. So there is a risk there, but I would, to be honest, that is one of the ones where I think we could learn. But there are some of these examples where actually we talk about going out and talking to others, but actually we probably we already do it. We already have as good an idea probably as anyone else. There are others where people are actively doing this and we don't. So the real exception sites also linking in with the possibility of CLTs, community land trusts. would, for me, be one of the areas that we would go out and go out soonest and talk to others who have delivered that. But yeah, I think there would be a risk attached to it, because in terms of land values, if you weren't to get planning, yeah, you're stuck with agricultural land. So yeah, I suppose in short, I don't think you'd get the land for agricultural value initially.
Thank you, Tim. So I think this is a thing of, we're going to be working up a strategy to hopefully deliver housing in whatever type it is, if we are going down that route, and then working ourselves up to even possible looking at strategic sites in years to come. But there needs to be a great ambition for delivering housing in the district that is appropriate. So, Councillor Ian Hall.
Thank you, Chair. When it comes to community land trusts, I think the model what we have in the district is at Beer, which I believe Councillor Pook has led, and I think they're actually going through their second phase now. Again, this is a massive community drive which has actually enabled this to happen. It hasn't happened on goodwill alone. But I am very much in favour of let's not reinvent the wheel, and we need to go out in the market to see what best practice is available. And we do need to look at resources. But with what Councillor Thomas was being saying, in short, should we actually look at binning the housing company? He's kind of like planted a seed in my head. When we actually look at the housing company as it was put together initially, and going back to what John said, and obviously I reiterated, if you build 10 and sell 6 and you've got 4 on the housing revenue account, if that's not kind of like the framework to work within, I don't see how the housing company is going to be able to be in a delivering vehicle. And therefore, what's been going around in my head in the last 10 minutes is, if that's the case, that it's not going to be a delivery vehicle, would we be better off putting this back with the Housing Review Board so that it is actually within its framework, which has been in existence for many, many years? So I'm just putting that out there for the moment, for people just to take that on board, because I do think Councillor Thomas actually does have a point. Unless we are going to be able to deliver, we ought to be maybe looking at stopping the housing company, because when I look at this in the simplest way, and I did say at the outset about what is our housing needs and what available assets do we have to develop, because how do we best sweat the assets what we presently have? And I know, living in my community all of my life, that we have people living in 3-bedroom houses that they would be happy to move as long as they stayed in their community, but they don't need 3-bedroom house, they need an assisted living unit, as so to speak. So we're going around and round in circles. But when we're actually looking at the recommendations, when we're looking at the bottom one, I think that needs to be considered if this is the best mechanism we can use to deliver the social housing, affordable housing, which is needed. I think we'll all agree that. Thank you, Chair.
So, Councillor Hall, just if I'm understanding you correctly, we should be basically recommending to the HRB that they undertake a review of the housing stock.
I believe we don't want to overcook it, Chair. We don't want to overcook it. We have a very functioning HRB, and with that housing revenue account, we have the mechanisms. Now, like I said, when the housing, to my mind, my memory, when the housing company was set up, this was to deliver housing. And I understand the essence, and I absolutely agree that this could be actually looking at the needs now, keeping the people in our district. We need more social housing, affordable housing. Now, this, in my mind, how the housing company was set up, I don't know that's going to be able to deliver the social housing, what is required, because at best we can look at, like I said, the model of 10, sell 6, have 4 going to the housing revenue account. It's the only way I feel it's going to be working. But if we're on a delivery of an per annum, how many do we need to be delivering per annum? And it's a huge task and a balancing act. So are we actually better off just putting this back to the housing review board rather than this topic where we are now?
I'll allow it. Councillor Paul Miller, you want to come back in?
Thank you for letting me. I didn't think you would. I feel like we're kind of going around the houses here, you know, send it to the Housing Review Board. I thought your suggestion of an informal working group was a very sensible one, and it needs a seconder. So just a hint to some of the members on the TAF, perhaps to second that, because I think that's the most sensible recommendation. I agreed with the vast majority of what Councillor Thomas said, except his idea to bin the housing company, which I think would be a bit hasty. Let's look, I mean, everyone's talking about the Bristol option, which I outlined. They're doing it through a housing company. So I think, I know it's dormant, but I think it would be a bit hasty to just bin it now. So I just hope somebody on this TAF is minded to second your recommendation, Chair, which I think is perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Ian Thomas.
Thank you. I'm always worried when Councillor Miller agrees with me on virtually everything, and I'm pleased
Not everything.
I said virtually everything. I'm pleased that he did highlight one thing, but I think he actually missed my point. My point wasn't that the housing company, a corporate structure of some form would not be the appropriate vehicle, but what we have is basically a 15 quid limited company at Companies House. And to be hanging all this importance on what it is or isn't, or what it could or couldn't do, for me, is missing the point completely. We're going down the route, the company, oh, well, maybe we should use the company. The company's nothing, it doesn't exist. It's not worth, probably not even worth the cost we put into setting it up. So please bin that philosophically. I'm not saying don't consider a limited company as possible as alternative of a corporate structure, but it isn't necessarily the only one. So I just feel we're getting far too honed in onto that. And we still haven't answered my question. What are we actually trying to achieve? You know, what if we're looking at social housing, what scale? Because that again will help answer a lot of the questions that other people are raising. Is it a couple of flats up a garage way? Or is it a significant strategic site where we take a large stake in the operation of it? You know, and you probably noticed me nodding, you know, absolutely. So council housing originally was provided as social housing primarily, and it's lost its way completely since then. Government policy is not helpful. Now, firstly, nobody in the new administration for me has actually come out strongly and said what the council's position is overtly on a right to buy. Are we lobbying to actually picking up the baton that the previous administration had? I'm not actually seeing any of it so far, but perhaps Councillor Arnott, I'll name him so he can give a chance to reply.
Yes, like Councillor Armstrong has written to the Secretary of State on that subject about a month ago.
Good, excellent. No, well, I'm pleased. I'm reassured on that. I hadn't actually seen a copy of it. But anyway, so we still don't go back to if it's social housing, what scale? What scale's our aspiration? And can we fund to that level? If so, what are the funding options? For me, everything else, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be harsh, but to argue about a particular garage set somewhere that we might have done 5 years ago is totally irrelevant to that if we don't get what we're actually trying to do and the structure to serve it and how it's going to be financed sorted. You know, and we can't just keep ignoring that. We need to roll the numbers.
And that's exactly why I made the suggestion of that informal working party to look at options. And then that will lead us to what resources required and then what finances. I think until we have the vision of what the council wishes, well, what the TAF wishes to do, we can't decide on how it's going to be done, specific sites or anything like that. We as a group need to work forward on actually creating a set of strategic vision really for the company or any company that should form from this. Joe Garfoot, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of agree really with Ian in that I think that my understanding is that the housing company was set up for something completely different than we're now thinking we might be using it for. So it might be that it is more appropriate to disband this particular company. And then once members have decided the best way forward, if a company is the way that we can achieve those aims, then actually maybe a different company with a different set of terms of reference can be set up. And that might be the most appropriate way to do it, because I think, I mean, obviously I'm kind of new here, but I think there's a danger that perhaps the company itself can kind of become a distraction from what people actually want to achieve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Ollie Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Councillor Thomas is absolutely right. We've set up this TAF to say, look, we've got this redundant housing company. How can we use it? Whereas actually, what we should be doing is saying, what do we want from our housing in East Devon, and how can we best deliver it? So I think he's probably right. We should lose the housing company, and maybe we should call this the Housing Development TAF instead. So it's an open forum where we look at how we provide the social housing that we want to see. In terms of scale, Councillor Thomas has raised that question. I definitely think we should be looking at small niche sites where we can work with small and medium-sized builders to provide those homes, and not try to go head-to-head with the volume builders at all, but look at the small areas where we can work with small builders, community land trusts, and provide social housing where people want it in niche sites.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Paul Arnott, you want to come back in? Go on.
Hello, was that by invitation, Chair? No, is there anything, I mean, I wouldn't want to use up any more of your oxygen there. I'm happy to, unless there was a particular point you think I should.
You had a blue hand up.
Then in which case, that's the usual. Sorry, Chair, thank you.
Councillor Ian Hull, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair. When we are looking at areas of supply and demand, which we're actually looking at and we're going to deliver, as I said, we really do need to have a housing needs survey for the whole of East Devon. Councillor Rylance at the beginning, she said there is 4,000 on the list. But I think what we need to do, especially with the new crop of youngsters coming through, finishing their education, we actually need to look at what the needs are of East Devon, and then we can actually look at all the appropriate available mechanisms to deliver that.
We have a lot of that, Councillor Hall, in the ORS study that came out, and it's just been published actually. So we have all the housing needs assessments and what we need for each area, so we can utilise that. I think. Could I just make a recommendation then, what I said earlier, but then also add to it the suggestion of Councillor Thomas and Councillor Davey that we wind up the company, and we ask council to change the purpose of this TAF. So then we look at housing delivery across the district rather than the specific housing company. Tim Child, you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, well, I'll cover what I was going to cover first, actually, and then we'll just come back to the statement you just made about the housing company. So, in terms of volumes, I think there's a danger at the moment of possibly trying to set a vision of what we want to achieve in terms of numbers, types, etc., before understanding what's possible and what's not possible. So I think one of the key things in terms of going out and talking to others who've delivered it is to understand on what scale they've managed to deliver it, and then comparing that to our ability to deliver it. So there's been talk about, for example, Bristol and having lots of land. Now, there are bits of land that we have, but we don't have, I don't think we have lots of it. So we clearly, in terms of taking this forward, we do need to have that higher level vision directive that Councillor Thomas mentioned, but that probably comes out of the development strategy But I'm just sort of some of what I'm hearing. I just think, well, yeah, really, really good. But is it possible? And to be honest, the only way we're going to find out whether it's possible is to actually speak to those who have done it and are doing it currently to better understand that. In terms of the housing company element, Simon might want to come in if he wants, but my understanding is that it's easy and cheap to get rid of, and easy and cheap to create once again. And I think there is a danger that as long as it sort of sits in the background, we keep refocusing on the housing company rather than actually what is it we're looking to achieve, what mechanisms are we going to use, and then once we understand what those mechanisms are, and is the housing company relevant to that. So unless Simon were to suggest to me that actually it's a huge headache to close and then restart, but particularly as we're talking about it, the very best, even if we kept it open as a live company, we'd probably need to change the purpose of it anyway. I just wonder if we close it, whether it focuses our attention to where it should be.
Simon, do you want to come in there?
Just agree with what's been said. No, it's a lot easier to close it and stop making nil returns, and then open one that you actually want and the structure that you want as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. John, you want to comment at this point?
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to confuse the debate, but I would caution against closing the company. We spent hours setting it up. It's not costing you anything. It's dormant at the moment. Until you've undertaken your research in terms of Bristol and what others are doing, you can just keep it quietly in the background and you can flex it as and when you need to. In terms of ambitions, the ambitions, as you say, have been kind of clearly stated in terms of need. We do need to produce something like 250 new homes a year to meet the need, and we know that if we exceed that on the years where we've exceeded that, so that's not just us, that's the bulk of that is through registered providers. If we exceed that, we know we start to take people off the housing register quite quickly, and we deal with the most acute demand around homelessness. So we're talking about 250 homes per annum plus. Great that the ambition is much higher than that. And I can tell you that the housing revenue account, we factored in the cost of providing something like 25 to 30 homes a year. So that's what we're currently able to fund. Now, again, all reviewable. And that's when those tensions come in with those other spending requirements that we have. So that might give an idea of scale of ambition. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Eleanor Rylance.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry I keep coming back in. So there are 16 of us on this call right now talking about a company that has done nothing since it was set up. And basically doesn't even have a sort of very well-defined purpose. I venture to suggest that that is in fact a cost. And I know, Simon, you have to return nil returns every year for the company, but can you just wheel out the same thing year after year? I mean, so what I suppose I'm building up to asking is it a major problem if we put the company to sleep while we try to work out what our actual housing strategy is? So maybe the only cost is that you keep sending in nil returns, and we stop talking about what we can do with the housing company and actually start talking about what we can do with our housing strategy and how to deliver more social housing and more housing for people locally. But we stop having meetings with 25 people to talk about a company that's actually done nothing so far, because at the moment, what we're talking about something that actually doesn't do anything. And I think we ought to be actually delivering on our commitments to the people of East Devon right now. We should be actually delivering houses that they can live in and that are actually affordable for them to live in, and not talking about something that's not actually achieving anything. But I take John's point that it took a long time to set up. But if we can stop talking about it and just actually work on the strategy rather than the housing company, maybe the housing company further down the line will have another purpose. But please, can we just stop talking about what we can do with the housing company and actually start talking about what we can do with housing? I think that's probably a better use of our time. So in terms of recommendation, I mean, I don't think would need to resolve to stop talking about the housing company, would we? But actually what we do need to resolve is how do we start talking about housing and the housing that we need to see delivered. I think, was it John who said that we actually have a fair amount of information about what the housing needs are. We also have emerging information through neighbourhood plans about what very local housing needs are in villages. Maybe we could draw on those as well. I think we need to be working far more in partnership with, as you say, parish councils basically and community land trusts, which obviously are not yet set up, but probably could emerge through neighbourhood plans. But the best laid neighbourhood plans will have this information available. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can ask parishes what their very local housing needs are and what they ideally would like to see delivered. And I can tell you, I can answer as a Broadcliffe Parish Councillor, what we need here is 1 and 2 bedroom homes. We don't need any more 3 and 4 bedroom houses built. We need single level 1 and 2 bedroom homes for older people so that they can move out of their current houses. And move into something that's far more suited to their needs. And we need family houses for families who are in dire straits. So, putting the 2 and 2 together, we can deliver things that actually work for the people very, very locally, but we need to ask local people what they want. But we have that information. We can use what's already there. We can start with the parish councils that are delivering really good neighbourhood plans and ask them what they want and what they need and work with them. And stop expending multiple resources doing the same thing. We just need to gather all this stuff together. But please, can we stop talking about this blooming housing company that's not actually doing anything, and actually start talking about how we deliver the right houses for the right people in the right places? Thank you. So I suppose my recommendation is that we actually stop talking about the housing company, not that we kill it, that we stop talking about it, and we start actually talking about the things that matter, which is delivering the actual houses in the places we need them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rylance. So that's a proposal, or one proposal? Yeah. So could I get a seconder for that? Councillor Davies seconded it. Thank you. So, Councillor Ian Thomas, you want to come in next?
Thank you, Chair. What I'd like to do, I think, is broadly support one of the proposals you had. But I think, to focus this down again, strategically focus it, I think we should be changing the TAF scope to be developing the strategy for social housing delivery, and actually change it the other way around. Let's get down to what we do want to do, cut out what we don't want to do, and actually use that as the focus. I think we should invite Councillor Armstrong to join us. As another appropriate portfolio holder. I think your input would be extremely helpful. Tim, I agreed with, well, he would really, because most of what he said agreed with what I'd said previously, but I don't agree with him on one thing, again, fundamentally, that it isn't what's possible that is the start point. It's got to be the need or the opportunity that's the start point. And where something is in part of the need or an opportunity, it quite often can become possible, whereas it might not be through traditional thinking be regarded as possible. So that would be my change. Fundamentally, as you probably recognise, disagree with John and Eleanor, I just don't think they've quite got my point, that the point is philosophically rather than practically. It really, by the time I've gone off the next paragraph, I could have a company formed for you. It takes 2 seconds, 2 minutes, and costs nothing. Just get it out of the mind frame. So we are agreed in the point, as with Eleanor, that the whole point is get it out of the mind frame, because it doesn't sit there. So I would like to formally support, I believe, if you will accept that amendment to the scope. Would you be happy with that? For the scope of the TAF, sorry, I'm losing screens. That was because I support that to resolve to invite Councillor Armstrong to join us.
Already a member. She's just absent from this meeting.
Oh, my apologies, because I thought she should certainly be a member and would give valuable input. And I'd thirdly propose that we immediately, without further delay or procrastination, the housing company is dissolved forthwith, hitherto, now and before the end of the meeting. And we get the notes in the Gazette and get it written off. And next time, can we think of a more inspired home name than East Devon Homes Limited?
Ian Thomas Limited.
Well, Miller Thomas Incorporated might be a scary name for it. That'd really get it going. Anyway, but joking apart, and I think again, you know, John actually has come up with another of my questions answered then. And again, it ties back to the focus on social housing. What we're actually trying to do is that he said 250 new homes are required. If we exceed that, we look to the housing list and the homeless. There's your target. There's your scope of the project. Now, how did it take so long to tease that out? Because the fact that we need that many means that certain avenues in the appendix at the end are no longer appropriate. If you're going to start delivering 250 plus homes per annum, you start to restrict the number of strategic approaches you have that are capable of doing that. Yeah? So that was really helpful, John. Put the scale on it. Anyway, does that help you, Chair?
It does indeed. Can you just repeat for the benefit of our DSOs what you're proposing?
Well, I'm proposing the scope of name of the TAF basically moves quite specifically onto strategic delivery of social housing. Period. I think that beyond that, what we do is the point about Councillor Armstrong's not relevant anymore. She just wasn't here. And the second point really on that is that the housing company in its current incarnation is dissolved herein forthwith and toot the sweet.
Thanks very much. Do we need a recommendation about the working party in there?
If you feel we want a working party, I'm very happy to second that if you feel that's going to help. But the danger is it depending on, again, is it the right way? Again, our cabinet may have a view on that, because I assume we refer back to them the scope of this TAF, and it'd be very pleasing to have cabinet's endorsement of the fact that whatever the working party and this TAF were doing was actually an important piece of work that was going to help refine and the scope and delivery of a social housing policy for East Devon District Council.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Ian Hall.
I would like to second with what Councillor Thomas is saying, and what I had my hand up for also was that it gets referred back to Cabinet as already been outlined by Councillor Thomas. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we've currently got two proposals on the table. So we'll take, I don't think there's anyone else wishing to speak. So we'll take Councillor Rylance's proposal first. We'll take that to a vote. So can we just have a repeat?
What was it, Chair?
Can we have that repeated, please?
That's exactly what I was just going to ask for.
Sorry.
Can we just have that repeated for the benefit of members, please?
So I think that what I suggested was that we put the housing company into hibernation, stop talking about it, but that's more of an informal suggestion. And the second arm was that we repurpose this TAF to start talking about delivery of social housing, which I think probably agrees with what Councillor Thomas said, said. So my proposal is not to kill it, but to put it into hibernation. So if you vote on that one first, and then maybe we move on to the nuclear option of Councillor Thomas's, killing it with fire, maybe.
Thanks very much. So
have the moderate option first.
If committee members, Councillor Hall, do you want to come in just before we vote?
Thank you, Chair. I think for clarification, from what Mr. Davey was saying, what is the risk? What is the risk if we did actually kill it off, and what is the benefit of us actually keeping it in hibernation? I think on that specific, I think we need to have a little bit more clarification before we go to the vote, Chair. Thank you.
No problem at all. Councillor, Simon Davey, do you want to come in?
To be honest, it's completely up to the committee. I can close it. Administration-wise, opening it up again is really easy, as Councillor Thomas said. The work that John was referring to is putting together all the articles of association, all the legals beforehand. Well, that still sits there and can be adapted as necessary in setting up a new company. The actual closing or opening of a company is very quick, and it's just Companies House. Your only risk is if you really like the name East Devon Homes and someone goes and opens up that name while we're in in a waiting for a decision type thing.
Thanks very much, Simon. So, Councillor Rylance, in light of that, do you wish to withdraw, or are you happy? Do you want us to take this to a vote?
Does anybody want to indicate whether they'd like to be able to vote on hibernating it rather than killing it? Okay, I'm not saying much.
No,
sorry, through you, Chair.
We'll take it to a vote then.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because I'm happy to withdraw if nobody thinks we should vote on it.
Councillor Hall.
Can I ask for you, Chair? Would John Golding agree with what Mr. Davey just said, please?
Of course, I'd agree with our finance guru on this. I was referring to all the work that we had to convince members and produce to get the company solvent and the business plan model that we're talking about changing quite radically. So yeah, happy if you want to dissolve the company, that's the members' decision.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, John. Paul Arnott, you're coming in just at the 11th hour. Come on.
So thank you for this indulgence, Chair. Of course, I think we all understand how companies are formed and whether they're just made dormant or whatever. It is trickier than you might think to re-register the same name. Actually, I know from personal experience in the last year, last few months, where I've had to.
You put yourself on mute.
Thank you, Chair. That was for the lip readers. Very brief point. I can understand the issues about whether to keep a company dormant or whether to have it struck off or whatever. Personally, I can't see any point in doing anything other than just leaving it there on the shelf. And I think the risk that will come out of this committee today, if this is reported, will be the headline that East Devon closes down its housing company. Just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. So, Councillor Rylance, do you want to withdraw, or would you like it to take it to a vote?
I feel like there's appetite to take it to the vote, actually. It's not going to take very long. There's not very many of us, so I can't see any problem with, pursuing my aim, really.
Okay.
Councillor Thomas looks devastated.
If members could indicate whether they're for Councillor Arnott's motion by using the green tick, or they're against it by using the red cross. If you could do that now.
Sorry, what's Councillor Arnott suggesting?
Councillor
I'm not suggesting anything.
It's me. It wasn't Councillor Arnott. He's not a member of this committee. It was me, that we actually put the housing company into hibernation, not kill it, and repurpose the forum to look at social housing. I suppose it's two recommendations, isn't it? Let's just go with my first recommendation, that we hibernate the housing company.
So could we give a green tick or a red cross, please?
Okay, Chair. For the benefit of those watching online, we are in the process of voting. Chair, I've got 3 voting for and 2 voting against.
Chair, you haven't voted.
I never usually vote. Never voted, Ian. I won't ever as chair. So that's 4. That's carried.
Chair, may I ask, is there actually a legal reason you can't vote?
There's not a legal reason. No, I just do it out of the fact that a chair should always remain impartial where possible. And this is a case where I can still remain impartial. Unless it's a deciding vote, I don't need to vote. So that's carried.
No.
So moving on from that, we haven't resolved anything else to do with any other mechanisms or anything like that. So do we need to bring forward any other proposals? Putting that to the task. Councillor Rylance?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to suggest that we set up a working party to examine social housing needs and delivery mechanisms. So I don't know what format I need to phrase that motion in, but whether that's good enough phrasing, because I guess we also need to look at financing mechanisms, how we pay for it. So do we need some more specific wording than that, or can we maybe ask for more specific wording from people who know what they're talking about rather than me?
Could I suggest that we just look to recommendation 2 as listed in the report, and whether that would be okay? Councillor Parr, you want to come in?
Yeah.
Yes, I just wonder whether what we really need to do is alter the name of this TAF to show exactly what we're doing. If we're not going to be focused simply on the housing company, and to say that we are focusing on ways to achieve social housing. So it's the name we need to change and the remit.
So could we go back to the previous proposal that I made, and I'll make it as a formal proposal, that we set up the working party as listed in recommendation 2. We then work with officers on what resources we need or we will need, and bring that back to a future meeting. We can then hone in on the mechanisms, and then that will lead us to the finance. And that I will make as a formal proposal. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I do think Councillor Parr has a really, really good point there. It's got to be what it says on the tin. It's very important that the electorate can actually see what's going on here, so they can actually buy into it. I think the electorate will be very happy if they actually saw what we're actually trying to achieve through this meeting today.
Yeah, I think so. Just to add to that, then, that we ask Cabinet that we repurpose the TAF. It's that. Would that need to go to Cabinet or to Council? I'm looking to officers just for a bit of help there.
Well, to Cabinet, this is a TAF set up by Cabinet, so your first reporting mechanism would be back to Cabinet, Chair.
Thank you, Sue. Councillor Miller.
And it's a very easy mistake to make, but this was one of the only TAFs, if I remember correctly, which was actually set up by Council, because it was your motion, was it not, that established it? So I just wanted to most TAFs are set up by Cabinet or scrutiny, but this one was set up by full Council. So I just wanted to make that point so we don't get the recommendation wrong. I don't know. No harm in sending it to Cabinet. Cabinet meets before Council anyway, so
yeah,
I guess my point's invalid.
Okay. So that would be a formal proposal that I've made. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Rylance. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Yeah, can I just ask, I thought as chairman you wouldn't need a seconder.
Very true. We propose it from the chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Parr. We'll take that to a vote then. So green tick for yes, red cross for no.
Okay, for the purposes of those watching online, voting is underway.
Green ticking. My green tick isn't working on my pad. Hopefully someone can see that or not.
You have got a green tick up, Councillor Hall.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
So at present, Chair, you've got 5 voting in favour and no other positions being taken.
Thanks very much, Sue. So unless anyone has anything else they wish to say, we'll bring that meeting to a close. So I'd just like to thank everybody, including the members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, can I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm that the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live. And until then, your comments will be live to the public. Thank you very much.